Georgia lawyers Bob and Irreverent D talk law. Listen up for stories about how things really happen in our legal system. On today's episode, Bob and Irreverent D dip into the mailbag to answer questions on contested liability. Now, sit back and take a listen as Bob and Irreverent D talk law.
Which one's my camera? This one over here?
That one over there. No.
Hey, welcome back to the Bob and Irreverent D podcast. I'm Irreverent D, Dwayne Singleton. This is Bob Benjamin O. Benson.
We just say it fast. We
Just say it really fast. I know your
Benson.
dad says it one way and you say it another.
Yeah, my dad says it wrong too.
It's okay. Personal injury attorney extraordinaire. If you got a personal injury case, this is the guy to call. We're here with another fascinating episode of the Bob and Irreverent D Talk Law podcast. So we're going to get straight into it. Are you ready for some questions?
I'm ready for the rapid
Look
fire
at me. I've got the
questions.
paper this time.
You
I
have it?
feel
Like,
powerful over here.
I'm kind of liking how you're like taking the reins over. It's nice.
You know.
Yeah.
Well, we want to talk about some things that I think are kind of your forte,
Yep.
and that is disputed liability.
We do handle disputed liability claims.
Because a lot of attorneys get the accident report, look at it, and say, oh, you got a citation in this case. You don't have a claim. That's not you.
No.
You dig a little deeper. You look a little harder. So let me ask you, what is a disputed liability? What does that mean?
Okay. So when you've been injured because of the conduct, because of the negligence of another person,
Right?
that person is responsible to you for your damages.
Okay.
In many circumstances where there's, the motor vehicle accident, my client is driving and they get rear-ended by the person behind them. In that circumstance, liability is pretty clear, right? You're not supposed to drive in such a manner that you run into people,
Right.
right? And you don't run into the back of people if you are paying attention. That would be the opposite, right? So liability is just the fancy legal word that we use to mean, look, you injured me. It was your conduct that injured me, and you shouldn't have acted that way. You should have been paying more attention. You should have been careful.
But Ben, the insurance company said they're not liable. They're not paying.
Yeah.
They said, I got a ticket.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that happens.
Right?
The insurance company is going to say whatever they want to say. Ultimately, what matters, Dwayne, is what a jury says or what a judge says.
So you're actually looking to see who was really at fault for the accident.
That's right. That's right. Now, there are times where more than one person is at fault.
Okay.
Think about
Explain.
Well, let's take an example of my client, Jane, is driving through an intersection, and she's got a green light, no question about it. And there's another person coming the opposite way, Sally, and she's turning left. She turns left in front of Jane. There's no doubt that Sally has the duty to yield to Jane, who's coming through, right?
Right.
Sally is allowed to make a left-hand turn, but only if it's clear. She's not looking careful enough because turns out it's not clear.
Right.
Right? Jane's coming. Well, Jane has a duty too. My client, Jane, has a duty to not get in a wreck if she can avoid it.
So she can't see her turning and just floor it and just like, here we go. We're going to
Right. I know Sally's going to be at fault, so
Right.
let's bring it on.
Right.
Same thing is true if you're a pedestrian and you see a car coming and you're standing on the curb and you know that you have like the little thing that says walk, walk, walk.
Right.
And you're in a car and there's a crosswalk right there, but you know a car, you're looking, you see the car is looking, like you can tell that the driver has had no intention of stopping. And you know that if they hit you, they're going to have been negligent because they're not supposed to be going through it. And you step out on off of the curb and into the thing and get nailed. You are at least partially at fault because you knew you're not supposed to walk in front of a moving car.
Right.
Right.
So you said an interesting thing. Let's talk about that. What do you mean by partially at fault for an accident?
All right. So different states handle comparative faults differently.
Okay.
In some states, you could come after another driver, and if that driver was 15% at fault, you could get a 15% recovery.
Okay.
Right. But our state does not do that. Let's talk about Jane and Sally again. Jane is, remember, the one that's going through the intersection. She has the green light. She has the right of way.
Right.
Sally is turning left. Well, Jane really maybe could have avoided the accident.
Could have pumped the brakes.
You could have pumped the brakes. You seen her turn and left in front of you. You didn't have to floor it, right? You didn't have to keep whatever. You could have tapped the brakes. You had the last clear chance to avoid it, maybe, right? So Jane is also partially at fault, even though Sally had no business turning left in front of her.
So is that why it's important to get in touch with you quickly so you can go out there and see if there's skid marks on the road and check all these other little things out?
I mean, whether you get in touch with me quickly or you don't, what you need to do, especially if you think that there's going to be contested liability or an argument about who is at fault, is find the evidence as quickly as you can and preserve it, whether or not you have a lawyer. Lawyers' offices like mine, we're designed to do that. We're designed to think, oh gosh, this is urgent. We need to get somebody out there right away. And so, we have tools that are available to do that. But you don't have to have a lawyer. What you need to do is preserve the evidence somehow. Take pictures, make sure that you get out and look and see if there's video from it. But whatever the case, what matters is actually what happened.
Right.
I'm not saying it doesn't matter what the police say. It does, right? But what they say is not binding.
They weren't there.
They weren't there.
Right.
They're just taking statements, right? The insurance company, what they say is not binding. Does it matter? Yeah, sure it matters because you want them to pay you for your damages instead of arguing with you, right? But what really matters is what are the facts? And so in this case, right, let's just say that we took Jane's case all the way to a trial and the jury is looking at all the facts and the jury as a panel decides together, well, Jane is a little at fault.
Right.
Jane could have maybe tried to do something. My client. So we're going to just say that Jane's 15%, 15% liable. But Sally is 85% liable. Clearly, Sally is more at fault. Now, if the facts were different, though, if the jury says, we think Jane really, really could have avoided this. She had plenty of room. She could see Sally turning and left in front of her for a mile away, right? She didn't have to keep whatever. Jane, we think, is 51% at fault. And Sally is, she shouldn't have been doing that, but she's only 49% at fault. If the jury says that, then Jane gets nothing. All right? Jane and I have to prove that Sally is at least more at fault than she was. So that's where contested liability comes in and where you can get in a circumstance where you only get a partial recovery.
Right.
So in that 15%, 85% circumstance I described, let's pretend that's what happened. Sally's 85% at fault. Jane is 15% at fault. We get a $100 verdict, $100 in damages. That means that Jane is only going to get 85 of those dollars because she was partially at fault.
Right.
Right. And so
she has to be over the 50% threshold.
That's right. She has to prove that Sally's at least 50% at fault, but her recovery is going to be reduced by the amount that she's also at fault. That's right.
Next question. What should I do at the scene to help my case?
Well, you want to, once you've established that you're in a safe place and that you're okay and you've called the police, what you want to do is really kind of observe your surroundings. You want to look and see, what evidence, especially if you think maybe the other person's going to say that it was your fault instead of their fault. You do want to take pictures. I mean, the pictures are very valuable. You also kind of want to look around at your surroundings and see where are there cameras, or where are there, or are there witnesses, people who have stopped, and engage with those witnesses. Ask them, did you see what happened? Make friends with them, right? Get their phone number.
Right.
A lot of times we have this problem where my client will say, oh yeah, there was absolutely a witness. I saw them talk to the police.
Nobody wrote their name down.
Nobody wrote their name down. The police didn't write them down in the report, nothing. Now, in many circumstances, we can still recover that because we always get the police video. We always get the dash cam and the body cam video. And most of the time, if the police talk to somebody, they're at least verbally talking about, okay, what's your name, or whatever. And we know that there's somebody. But you can't just rely on the police. You want to, especially if it's one of those circumstances where, somebody's turning left in front of you, or there's a stop sign. There's, you need eyewitness testimony. You want to engage with anybody you think was around that might have seen it. Absolutely.
Do I need a dash cam in my car? And how can video impact my case?
You should. I have dash cam in my truck, but it's not because I'm likely to get in a car wreck. I'm actually not. I think because I'm a personal injury attorney.
You drive real safe.
No, like people around me drive safe. They're like, oh, don't get And
well, because I do criminal defense, I don't speed hardly ever. Like I'm just very cautious. I check, make sure all my lights work on my car.
Right. Yeah. The police are like, oh, there goes Irreverent D. We're gonna get him. Yeah. No, and plus, like I have a force field that I always put up around my truck. But I do have a dash cam on my truck. But it's mostly so that I can actually take things that I see. That are like, man, that's really dangerous. I need to, put that up on my website and say, hey, this is dangerous conduct. Don't allow people. I think we kind of have a duty as ordinary citizens that if somebody is acting in a bad manner, we need to like honk at them.
Right.
Like it's so easy. Like it's just public service announcement. Listen, if you see someone go through what you know is a red light, I'm always waiting. Anyways, I'm looking. It doesn't matter. I have a green light. I'm still looking both ways.
Right.
I've seen this way too many times, right? But if you see somebody blowing through that light and it's red, you have a duty to honk at them. And not just honk at them, lay on your horn. The only way that conduct is going to change is if other citizens are holding them accountable. Like you cannot be acting like this. Anyways, that's my public service announcement. You see somebody go through a red light. You see somebody go through a stop sign. Don't just honk. Don't just like tap. Lay on your horn.
Reminds me of the story of the guy gets in the car with his friend. His friend just drives through the first red light. He's like, why'd you do that? And he goes to the next red light, drives through that one. Man, what are you doing? He gets to the third red light. It turns green. The guy slows down. He's like, why are you slowing down this way? He's like, my brother lives around here. All right. Anyway, stupid jokes. How long can a claim take to resolve if liability is disputed? Does it make it longer, shorter?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It depends on the circumstances. Every case has three parts: liability and damages and coverage. And we're not really going to talk about damages and coverage in this question, but they do affect how a case gets resolved, especially if there's a contested liability issue. If we can't decide who's at fault, if there are compelling arguments about the other two things, it might resolve quickly. Let me give you an example. We had this client who was turning left, and everybody in the world said it was his fault. We interviewed witnesses. They all said, yeah, the guy totally turned left, and it wasn't. He had a red light, whatever. We were in really hot water. I'm thinking, like, golly, how are we going to? We have to have some. And of course, my client testified. I'm convinced I had a green arrow.
Right.
And that's enough evidence to go in front of a jury.
Factual dispute.
It's a factual dispute. My client is convinced that he had a green arrow. Okay, fine. Right. That's evidence. That's enough for me to go on. And I like the guy. So, those two things make it so. But the other two things really played a factor. And that is, one, my client lost his leg.
Wow.
He had to get life flighted to Grady. He had $1 million medical bill. His damages were through the roof, huge damages. Like if you lose your leg, it's a big deal.
Right.
Right. And the other driver only had a $25,000 policy.
Wow.
And so it was contested liability. Right. And so we contacted that guy's insurance company and said, look, we understand how bad this looks for our client, but understand, like, if we win, our win is going to be millions of dollars.
Right.
Right. You need to pay the $25,000. And the insurance company looked at it and said, we think we can win. We think your client, Mr. Ben, was at fault. We're not so convinced that
wasn't worth the gamble.
It's not worth the gamble. Right. And so that can speed things up if the other two factors in the case are so overwhelming. That's a really extreme example.
Sure.
But most things are. But the general answer to the question is, yeah, if it's contested liability, it's going to be a longer game.
Longer time.
Yeah. But I mean, the alternative is you don't do anything.
Right. And you just don't file anything. You collect nothing.
You get nothing. Yeah. I'd rather take a long time and get something than have a really short nothing.
Now, I hear this all the time, and I need you to answer this. Will my insurance premiums increase if liability is disputed?
It may. If the police think that you're at fault and they give you a citation for being at fault for the wreck, and your insurance company looks at it and says, "Yeah, Dwayne,
You did it.
sure looks like you're
Caught the tail.
your insurance company will increase your premiums." Now, if that doesn't necessarily mean that limits our options. We've seen this happen. This is kind of like mind-boggling, right? But let's just say I get in a wreck. Sure looks like it's my fault. And my insurance company says, "Ben, love you. You're a great customer and everything, but we're going to accept liability. We're going to pay for Dwayne's car. We're going to pay for Dwayne's injuries," right? Does that mean I can't file a claim against you if I'm convinced that you're at fault?
You still can.
I still can.
Right.
Yeah. And not only can I, but it's also somewhat likely I'll get money from your insurance company, even though my insurance company's paid you.
Right.
It's weird. Like this has happened, a handful of times where we've had to file cross lawsuits, right? And there's 4 lawyers. I'm representing my client against the other person. The other person has a plaintiff's attorney's filing a lawsuit against my client, and there's 2 defense attorneys.
More lawyers, more time, more longer it's going to take.
Yeah, yeah. But and in those cases, both insurance companies paid both parties, even though both insurance companies were convinced that the other party was at fault.
Now, if I got a ticket and I was cited at fault,
Yep.
Is it going to affect you if I go down and pay that ticket?
Absolutely. You cannot plead guilty to that ticket. Otherwise, you are absolutely screwed. Okay,
And that's how we end up working on a lot of cases too.
That's right. That's right. Because you're like, I need you to get this person out of that ticket because the police think that it was my client's fault. And if my client goes down there and says, "I'm just going to pay the ticket," then that really does. It really does bind my hands. Because my client has pled guilty to the same thing that the insurance company thinks he's guilty of, but then we really are screwed. You can't do anything.
And prosecutors get so frustrated. They're like, "They brought you in to handle this failure to yield ticket," and I'm like, "Yes,
yeah."
And I'd like a jury trial, and they're like, "What?
Oh God!
What's wrong with
For God's sake, please."
That's right.
Yeah. Now, if your criminal defense attorney gets the ticket reduced to something different,
Right?
Some other thing, right? My client got cited by the police for failure to yield, right? I say, "Look, client, you need to get Dwayne and get down there and get it changed, right? Or get it whatever. Dwayne sits down with you. You're in the traffic court, and the prosecutor says, "Listen, not to put too fine a point on it, we just want you to pay the fine, right? Can we just keep the fine the same, and we'll just change the charge to driving too fast for conditions, right? Or
violation of a ordinance or a statute.
An ordinance violation, right? And as long as it doesn't implicate the thing,
Right.
then it's okay, right? Now it kind of does look bad, but I mean, I've had plenty of times where my client was, for example, accused of staying in the suicide lane for too long, right? And a wreck happened in the suicide lane, right? And my client actually, before I ever got involved in this case, pled guilty to it. And I was like, he says, "Is that going to cause a problem?" I'm like, "Yeah, kind of.
You just admitted you're at fault.
You admitted you did something that's really close to being like right on target." Eventually, we still got him money. Like it was, and the key thing about that is, I guess we have to wind up with this, but the key thing about it is being absolutely persistent and knowing that you have to stay the course. You have to just keep pushing and let them know we're not going away. We're not giving up. We're not walking away. We are going to continue on this course until we go to trial. And once they kind of know that, then they'll say, "Okay, well, let's just work something out."
Right.
Right. But it may take them longer for that to sink in.
Well, that's great.
Well, thanks. I mean, those are all really fascinating questions. Well, I think we could talk about contested liability for maybe 3 whole episodes.
That's right.
Yeah. But thanks for joining us. Make sure that you subscribe. We love our subscribers.
Like and subscribe. Comment down below. Let us know where you're watching us from. Just put your name
where
you're from.
We're getting a lot of people watching. It's great. I mean, we have thousands of subscribers now. It's really wonderful. Thank you for being supportive.
We appreciate the support.
Yep. Have a nice day.
Bye, guys.
Thanks for listening. Tune in next time when Bob and Irreverent D talk law.